Good afternoon. I'd like to convene the meeting of the February 20th Board of Adjustment. It is 1:30. We are in City Council chamber. We are here today to hear special exemptions, variances, oil and gas related cases, and appeal from the decision of a director. We have a very full docket today. We'll try to move through it as fairly and as quickly as possible, so please make your statements very succinct. The first item on the agenda would be to receive the minutes of our previous meeting.
We're going to put those on the next one.
Okay.
They'll be on the March.
They'll be on the next docket. Then we have 4 continuances by the staff that are listed in our materials, item number 26, 25, 26, 27, and 28. Are there any continuances by the public? Okay. I'd entertain a motion to continue those cases. Yeah, one.
I'll move the item.
Okay.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor? Okay. We have 2 items on our consent docket today, items number 1 and 2. There's no objection for the board to remove those from the consent docket. I would entertain a motion for approval.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Motion passes. We are going to deviate on the items requiring a separate vote. We do have a time constraint, so the first case would be Kathy. We have a gentleman with a time restraint.
We're going to move one up.
We'll move one up.
Item number 19, case number 13853, request of Hampel Leasing for a variance to the hard surface paving and landscaping requirements located at 8001 Pole Road.
I want to thank you for a little special favor here because of the fact that I do have to get out of town. My name is Merrill Gordon. I'm with Gordon Associates Architects. I am the architect on this project. I also have with me 2 gentlemen that are involved in the project. First is Ted Dallas, who is the facilities manager for Hampel Oil, and Nick Penner, who is the project superintendent on the construction project. We are here today asking for some relief on the amount of hard surfacing we have to have in our driving and paving area, and a second reduction for landscaping requirements due to the type of project that we have.
You're asking for 2 variances today, one for the landscaping and one
That's correct.
for the gravel requirement.
Yes, sir.
Have you read staff's report where they question the issue as far as the landscaping requirement is, and would you address that and tell us why you want some
Sure.
variance on that?
This, of course, is basically an industrial-type project in the same area. Surrounding facilities have no landscaping at all, and we do want to provide some. We'd just like to be able to reduce it to half, and that's what we are proposing to do.
Staff says at a minimum the applicant should provide an alternative landscaping plan. Would you have any objection to making that a part of any approval process here today?
That would be fine.
All right. And as far as the parking is concerned, would you have any problem with us making that conditional, limiting it for a period of time where you come back and we can determine if additional parking is needed in the future?
Sure. I don't think that would be a problem.
I was just going to say, it might just be easier for staff, just limit that to the current use rather than a specific time period. So if the use changes, then we take another look at it.
That's a better idea.
At that time.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. When I went over this, I was pretty good with fitting in on all of the elements except the financial hardship. So if we approve it, I'm not basing it on financial hardship. I could fit you in the other elements, but it's in the reasons, and I didn't consider that.
Right. what I call to be the maneuvering area, which is the area that we did want to use gravel. There's about 120,000 square feet of that, and it was quite amount.
I'd make a motion to approve, conditioned upon, number one, that the use does not change, and number two, that they submit an alternative landscaping plan that's acceptable by the city.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item number 3, case number 13854, request for use variance of Stevens & Johnson Operating Company for permit to drill an oil gas well located at 6001 South Hattie Avenue.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Russ Walker. I am the lawyer representing the applicant, Stevens & Johnson. I have had the privilege of appearing before you on a number of previous occasions for wells proposed to be drilled and drilled by Stevens & Johnson in southeast Oklahoma City in an area that is known as the Oklahoma City Field. It has been known as that since the early 30s. I can discuss with you any aspect of this application which you would like to discuss. In particular, I could discuss the 4 criteria, which one, or any of them, which one must show to seek a variance and to prove that one would be entitled to a variance. If we have, if we're short of time and I have to do this 5 times in the same general vicinity, I would just operate as you all request me to.
I think we'd be comfortable if he stated all the elements on the first one, and then we talked about the facts that are different to each separate one.
What I was thinking we'd do is handle all 5 and then see if there's any opposition and address them on an item-by-item basis.
That's fine, too.
Do we want to ask for opposition? We don't think there is any. We don't know that anything's been
Are there,
filed in advance.
is there anybody present that's in opposition to these items? There being none, go ahead.
I think the first thing that you might want to note is that of these 5 properties, 2 have an I-2 moderate industrial park zoning. Those 2 are in Stevens & Johnson's own yard. So there shouldn't be any undue burden on any particular surrounding person. There really are very few particular surrounding persons. So, often I think we could discuss that a request of this type might cause a hardship, but whether it's an unnecessary hardship or not would be probably the principal issue. And in this case, I would suggest that this would cause no particular hardship to anybody. The other 3 matters are all in I-3 heavy industrial district, and they're right behind the Phillips gas plant down there. Nobody will even see them. So, again, I don't think that any of this is going to cause a hardship. The condition particular to this particular property, to each of these properties, is that they happen to contain in the subsurface what we believe to be commercially productive quantities of oil and gas, which are, those things are, beneficial to the owners of those interests, beneficial to the state of Oklahoma, beneficial, at least in my view, to the population as a whole in the United States of America. So that would be the particular condition that exists. I don't think, because of what I've described already, that we would be causing any substantial detriment to a public good. Again, there's no surrounding owner who would be inconvenienced by any of this, and I don't think it would impair or impede the purposes of the zoning ordinances in these cases, particularly given the current use of these lands. And again, permitting drilling is, in fact, the minimum relief necessary that would satisfy the desire and necessity to extract these hydrocarbons. And I think that those explanations apply to all 5 of these matters.
I'd make a motion to approve agenda items 3 through 7.
I think you need to have a motion on each individual
We do?
case.
Okay.
Would there be any other questions on items 3 through 7 by any of the board members? And let's address them one at a time. I entertain a motion on item number 3.
So moved.
Second.
And cast your votes. Motion carries. I'd entertain a motion on item number 4.
So moved.
Second.
Cast your votes. Motion carries. Entertain a motion on item number 5.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, cast your votes. Thank you. I'd entertain a motion on item number 6.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. I'd entertain a motion on item number 7.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate your help.
Item number 8, case number 13845, request of Bill Gummerson and Associates for a variance to allow a mural with sponsor identification on the face of a building located at 12201 Northwestern Avenue.
Yes, my name is Bill Gummerson, 419 North Classen Boulevard. I have with me, and I'm representing Special Care, and I have with me the Executive Director, Pam Newby, Betsy Brunstetter, architect with ADG, and Roger White from my office. And I did submit a letter in reference to the items, and if you all have read that, I'm just here to respond or answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, my one and only question, comment, concern, it was the very last picture. That looks like commercial advertising.
It is, in fact, not. The artist that did that work did that prior to the commercial advertising that you could be referring to if you look at the name that's included on the signage. This artwork was done and submitted prior to them even being solicited for funds.
Just struck me as a coincidence.
Okay.
I guess my question is sort of in a similar vein. I'm just not at all clear about what the actual hardship is here.
Well, what we've done is the distance that our building sets back with this addition from 122nd Street and with the mural and scale the way it has been done, if we were to adhere to the requirements of the 10% of the size of the mural with the lettering, it would serve absolutely no purpose in terms of giving the people that have given to this cause. So from a recognition standpoint, as people pull up in the parking lot, we felt as if it is very important from an identification standpoint with these donors to be able to give them credit, and credit where a person could actually see it. I would suspect that no one will identify the individual donors from 122nd Street and the distance, but our purpose was to identify it from the sidewalk on the south side as you pull up to this area and to the facility. And so the hardship is the location and distance, and then the scale of the lettering and the backing of the signage, which is limited, according to code, to 10%. We actually did a takeoff in reference to the lettering itself, and if you take the lettering, ignore the background for the lettering, and you just take the lettering, it actually occupies 7.8% of the mural square footage.
Other questions?
I'd make a motion to approve based upon visibility and distance.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. And the motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all very much.
Item number 9, case number 13846, request of Westgate Marketplace Developers for a variance to the arterial sidewalk and landscaping requirements located at 6300, 6500, and 6616 West Reno Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dennis Fox, 522 Colcord Drive. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Zerby, who developed this very successful shopping center in Oklahoma City. When it was originally developed, it was thought, and the PUD provided, that you would have more large box retailers and the back of their building would face onto Reno. as time has passed, what has transpired is the two boxes on the right that you see on your screen in the back of the staff report on the map, those will be developed as retail centers that front onto Reno. Our request is that instead of a 20-foot setback, which would have been appropriate for the big box users, we'd be able to have a 10-foot landscaping buffer on the frontage on Reno, which will be consistent with some of the other uses out there and will allow us to have retail fronting onto Reno. Now, the pictures I've given you show some of the big box areas, the vacant area, two areas that we want to have retail on, and then the pictures give you a good idea of what Reno on the south side of the street looks like. So our first request is that instead of a 20-foot landscape buffer, we'd be able to do a 10-foot landscape buffer, which will allow us to develop the retail. Does anybody have questions on that? And our second request is a sidewalk variance. In the last, we got a sidewalk variance in 12, and so I attached a staff report for your review in this same area, just a little bit to the west. And the third box that is on the left side that shows the retail existing, what we're asking for is in that and the other two boxes that we not have to put in sidewalks. If you look at the pictures, you'll see there's drainage areas, there's the back of buildings with walls up, and so continuity-wise, there's really not a need for it. And that would be consistent with the variance that was granted in 12. Terrell Zerby is here, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about the change of conditions that have taken place over the last few years, and he is a developer of this center. Terrell.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I am Terrell Zerby, 7725 West Reno. We first began development at Westgate Marketplace in 1998 with PUD 631. Walmart was the initial occupant there and frankly drove the PUD. They backed to Reno, so it was a request of some of our neighbors to the north that we extend the setback to 20 feet. Walmart, as did we, agreed. In fact, the president of Farmers Union at the time asked that we go ahead and accept a 20-foot setback from Reno on this center core as well. And we said fine. At that point in time, we knew not whether buildings would back up to Reno or whether they would front Reno. With the development of the Ross, Best Buy, et cetera, those lots will now facilitate buildings fronting Reno. So we're simply asking for a change to that initial PUD to be consistent, I think, with what is customary along Reno, that we have 10-foot setbacks as opposed to the old 20-foot setback that was agreed in 1998. As it relates to, and I will say this, I can say that relative to the two boxes on the right, the dash lines, but the box in 726, that buffer is already at 20 feet relative to the spacing with the Dix, and so we don't have to amend that. It's already in place. It's fine, and those buildings back up to Reno, so it's not a concern. As it relates to the sidewalk, as Dennis was saying, we did receive a variance relative to the Dick's Sporting Goods. Again, that building faced to the south. We have no other sidewalks at Westgate Marketplace in that, for the most part, it was initiated in 1998. The second PUD 726 came 2 or 3 years thereafter. I certainly support the sidewalk ordinance. It's good, and it should continue to be enforced from this point forward. However, as it relates to Westgate Marketplace, and with its longstanding history, and we don't have sidewalks there yet, this would be just kind of an infill as it relates to sidewalks with no continuation, behind Walmart or 2 points to the west. So we ask for your consideration. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions of Terrell or myself?
I just was looking at Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks. I was looking at picture number 3, and it appears that there is a sidewalk here, and that's in existence.
That's a drainage ditch.
Okay.
That's retention along Reno, right?
That is correct.
I understand that the need for the big box to a smaller model has changed, and I don't have a problem with the landscaping issue. This committee as a whole has struggled with the past of the sidewalk issue and how to move forward where we have a city that continues to develop and evolve in different areas of town where maybe retail at some area become more light industrial at others, where there may be a chance for some type of housing in the future. I can't sit here and predict what's going to happen 50 years from now. So would your client be, like we've done in the past, is maybe didn't we condition on the sidewalks, did we condition the use of as long as it's used for this purpose?
We'd be fine with that.
Okay.
I think what we've done on some of them in the past is just limit it for a period of time.
And come back.
I think that staff is going to recommend that, if you condition it on use, it's probably a better. JJ, would you agree? Okay. The other thing, too, is on the landscaping. I mean, I'm sympathetic with the condition now and the 10-foot. But again, none of us knows what's going to happen if that area redevelops in a way where the 20-foot might be the appropriate landscape buffer. Is there any way to structure a motion so that we're able to offer them the variance on the landscaping, but not make it a permanent variance?
We could probably agree that if you had big box users, we'd have the 20-foot because they'd back up. We're ready to develop, so we think it'll develop just the way it is. That'd be fine.
I would agree to that.
What are your thoughts on the sidewalk?
I would condition it to the use. What we don't want to do is create a scenario where we've got such a patchwork where we've granted variances, and like the chairman says, none of us knows, 5, 10 years and more down the road how these areas are going to change and end up. And so we don't want to create a variance that would.
And also, I don't want to force somebody to come back here in 5 years just because they have to come back here in the interest of time when the use hasn't changed.
What I'm concerned about is the unnecessary hardship. What's the unnecessary hardship here? We got to start somewhere. I mean, you've got to put in sidewalks somewhere, and that's my concern.
Well, I think it's apparent, this is an area where there's not a lot of pedestrian traffic in this area. You've also got some extenuating circumstances, the drainage and the terrain, I think that might justify, granting the variance request. What we want to do is say, hey, right now we understand, that a sidewalk may not make sense, but we don't want to preclude a sidewalk sometime in the future.
Okay.
Coming, I guess, from the Planning Commission and from that perspective, I just have to say that I can't see the basis here for varying the sidewalk requirement. I mean, nobody ever wants to put them in. It's the fact that it's a sidewalk to nowhere is, a common complaint in a city where we didn't build any sidewalks for 40 years. I think we do have to start someplace. I think in this case, the fact that they got a variance once before is simply sort of a self-induced hardship, if you will. It's not a basis for hardship here. I think the way to keep there from being a patchwork is to stop granting sidewalk variances. I think, we need to have them put in. There's never going to be any pedestrian traffic if there's not a sidewalk. So.
Here's when we first began to look at sidewalks differently, and for a period of time we did grant variances, is when you look at the surrounding, if there's no residential and no residential, housing in the proximity, and you would end up with a limited sidewalk and no real justification for anybody to use it. To me, it makes it easier to consider the variance. But again, to structure, the request around, or the variance request around. I
agree with that comment. I think the problem is each one of these situations is very unique, and they really have to be examined on an individual basis. It's hard to just make a blanketed statement throughout a city as diverse and large as ours that we have to do it one way or we have to do it the other. And I struggle with, Janice, your comments, but I think this is the only real solution at this time.
I guess the question I have, JJ, is what's on both sides of the property, and what's the future in store there as far as sidewalks being built?
If anything is built anywhere along Reno, a sidewalk requirement is in play. We would require a sidewalk. One thing I would add is, you've tied these variances to use in the past, but in this case, I don't think that will work if you don't have a use here to tie it to.
I agree.
It's valid.
If you want to try to explain what the unnecessary hardship is for putting in this sidewalk, I'm all ears, but I have great concerns about not doing this just because it's expensive or it costs money.
It's not. It does not have to do with money. As Mr. Austin said, and I think he said it better than I could, when you look at the circumstances, we don't have any residential here, but more importantly, Mr. Stonecipher, it's not a money issue. It's an issue of, when you look at the pictures, and the one picture, number 3, that you thought was a sidewalk, well, that is a detention area where it runs down 5 to 10 feet, and that's just an area for dealing with water. So you got a detention area that's kind of in the middle. You've got the back of buildings. You've got walls, and so it's really a scenario that we don't think it's necessary based on the circumstances of this case. I can tell you from a planning standpoint, I think Ms. Powers can confirm this, hopefully, we don't bring cases and ask for variances to sidewalks anymore. And so from a planning standpoint, we'll put them in. If this was a straight shot and we didn't have detention areas in the back of buildings, we'd be okay with it. But here, we do have unique circumstances.
And the unique circumstances would be the detention areas. Is that what you're saying?
Detention area and the fact that you've got the backs of buildings in some areas, they've already got landscaping, you don't have any sidewalks, you're going to have 2 little areas in essence that would have sidewalks that would go to nowhere and lead into a detention area or the back of buildings.
But you'd agree with me that in the future there could be sidewalks built on the adjoining pieces of property?
Could be.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd have in the detention area, but the other areas you could.
Can we, Mr. Chairman, break this up into 2 matters, considering separately?
I think the landscaping needs to be one matter, and I think the second needs to be, the sidewalk needs to be another matter. If I'm hearing J.J. correctly, we don't have a use in the way this is presented to us, so the only thing we could do if we wanted a temporary type use on the sidewalk is to put a time frame on it, correct?
I think that's right.
So let's deal with the landscaping issue first.
I'd make a motion to approve the landscaping variance.
From a 20-foot setback to a 10, okay. And a second? Yes.
We had talked about conditioning that in the event the use changed. Because at
that's
some
true.
point, there might be redevelopment that would justify the 20.
We need to put a
I'll
time limit
amend
on
the
it.
motion to include that. I'm sorry, that's my
In that
fault.
case, I will second the motion.
I thought the motion was if the buildings were to front Reno, we'd have a 10-foot, and if we had a big box that backed onto Reno, then we'd go up to
20
20-foot.
foot.
Right.
I'd amend my motion to say that, please.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, that deals with the landscaping. Second variance regarding the sidewalks. What time frame would the board be comfortable with? Mr. Box? What time frame do you think your client would be comfortable with? We don't want to, obviously, we have to put a check, and this is the only way we can do it. Ms. Serby, I don't want to waste your time.
I'm listening here and understanding your dilemma as it relates to policy and how you move forward. And so I'm hearing maybe that perhaps that this sidewalk might not be appropriate here, maybe, not to stretch, but it doesn't, you don't want to go on indefinitely. So if there's a change in the use, would it not, Kathy, if there was a building permit that came in subsequent to this building permit, wouldn't they have to adhere to the city zoning ordinances at that point in time? So would that not take care of it anyway when a second building permit comes through? And that would answer the same question as it relates to uses subsequently down the road. Just a thought.
I believe if it's in a PUD, that's no, correct? Yeah. PUD,
The PUD would control.
yeah. So that's the only check we have. Why is a time frame.
So I guess we would invite the applicant to tell us what time frame, because it sounds like that's what it's come down to.
I think that's the only bullet left in the gun.
Okay, so perhaps, no sidewalks today, but at some timeline in the future, a sidewalk would be required. Is that
I think the issue for us is that we don't know what will happen in subsequent years there. And what we don't want to do is create a variance that's permanent, not knowing how that area may be redeveloped or change in composition.
I agree. Would this be fair if we give you 2 years, a 2-year variance, and you come back and we'll address the issue again 2 years from now? Would that be fair?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that the motion?
The motion would be
Motion's
to
by
grant the
Mr. Stone
variance for 2 years.
2 years.
I'm okay with that. I'll second it.
Second. Okay. All in favor? Okay. It carries for 2 years. Thank you. The next case.
Item number 10, case number 13847, request of Rollins for a variance to the parking lot design standards located at 4025 North May Avenue.
We're bringing this case, Dennis Box, and I'm here with Mr. Haynes, and we're bringing this case to ensure that Janice Powers knows we're serious about building a Sam's on this property. We had a case at the Planning Commission last week, and we were able to get approval. This has been a hodgepodge, and to Commissioner and Board of Adjustment member Powers, we apologize, but as we indicated at the Planning Commission, we had a scenario where this is the old Lynn Hickey dog site. It's been vacant for 20-plus years, and we were forced to do 2 separate little zoning cases, and now we're just asking for 1 variance. If you look at the map that I've handed you, and Mr. Haynes put this together, there are 2 areas where we don't have the ability to have an internal sidewalk unless we lose parking spaces, and we're right on the edge of our parking ratio. In fact, when this case was scheduled before, we had 2 variances, and we were able to do away with the variance on a number of parking spaces. So what we're asking is that we be allowed not to have an internal sidewalk in those 2 little areas. Mr. Haynes is here as an engineer if you have any questions. We have a kind of a unique site. You can look at the shape and size of it. That's one of our problems, and that's why we're before you.
And we do have a sidewalk here that will assist with pedestrian traffic.
We do. And we have sidewalks all around the rest of the property, internally. It's just these 2 little areas.
Questions?
I'd make a motion to approve the variance.
There's a motion on the table.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Cast your votes. Now, don't tell Mr. Harris today's his 93rd birthday and I've approved something for Sam, so he wouldn't be very happy, so.
Item number 11, case number 13850, request of Alford Hall Monahan Morris for a variance to permit a building with exposed exterior metal located at 30 Northeast 2nd Street.
Hi, my name is Eric Schmid, 726 West Sheridan Avenue. I represent Alford Hall Monahan Morris Architects. I'm representing also Richard McCowan with City Center Development, who you might remember is the developer from Level Urban Apartments in Deep Deuce, as well as the under construction Mosaic Apartments in Deep Deuce as well. Today I'm standing in front of you because we have a really unique opportunity to present design ideas to you, which normally would be presented to a DDRC hearing or some other avenue. But because the piece of land that we're trying to develop sits in PUD 1078, this is our moment to try and create a unique, exciting project in Oklahoma City that really hasn't been developed yet. So you'll see that the property sits at Northeast 2nd and Oklahoma Avenue, and the property is about 90 feet wide facing onto Northeast 2nd. And what we're proposing on that tiny little PUD site is a really exciting, lively, mixed-use office, potentially restaurant, event space that enlivens the public zone to the east using shipping containers. So you'll see from the rendering on my right, that would be sitting at the intersection at Oklahoma and 2nd, looking southwest towards the project. The reason I'm here in front of you today is PUD 1078 specifically disallows corrugated metal finish. And what I want to talk to you today about is this project that we are developing is unique, lively, exciting, and while it doesn't strictly fall into the PUD, we think that it inherently follows the letter of the intent of the PUD, which is to develop well thought through, live, work, play, well-designed, well-crafted developments.
I have a question. Your application states that this is temporary.
Yeah, so the really exciting thing about this project is the current economic status makes it very difficult to provide a long-term project on this site. And the PUD strictly says you should use masonry materials, which have a very permanent material quality. Richard has hired us to investigate a really unique opportunity, which is this is a temporary installation, up to 10 years. And the only way that you could really provide temporary, exciting, mixed-use projects on this site is using shipping containers, which inherently are structurally corrugated metal. So realistically, what we think is the only way to really enliven this public zone in the interim future is to use this system. And we think aesthetically it is not detrimental to the neighborhood, but it in fact will enliven the neighborhood.
Have you had anybody aware of, or is there anybody present that protested this corrugated metal building?
We haven't had any protests, and actually the really unique thing about this project is we originally had this intent on a site north, bordered between Harrison, 4th, and Oklahoma, and we have moved it now to this location. That site was also in the PUD, and we presented it to the DDRC as a communication item so that they could start to understand these types of buildings that could have a future in Oklahoma City. The DDRC responded very well, and they were excited about the project and disappointed that they didn't get to be the ones to approve it. So we have not had anyone come to us discouraged by the proposal, and we've only seen people encouraged and excited about it.
I guess the question that I want to put on the record and make sure it's clear, how old is the PUD? When was it adopted?
PUD, from my records, was approved in 2005.
Okay. And it's clear that we are not attempting to build this property or build this project as an industrial shed of any type whatsoever.
It is very clear that the intent is not to establish an industrial shed, which we think the reason the corrugated metal was included in the PUD initially was to keep warehouses from being built in the neighborhood. And so this is not inherently warehouse. This is flexible, affordable office space, and restaurant use.
And going by there and looking at the property, the landowners to the east, west, and north have no objection, correct?
I mean, I think the intent of the PUD was not to have somebody put an light industrial building with metal in a yard where they could haul, like, plumbing, oil and gas related. This design is clearly different from what the PUD is trying to prohibit. That's how it's different in my mind, at least.
I just, as a point of reference, the next case after this gentleman is we're going to deal with a similar construction, and almost literally a few blocks away. The thing that requires them to be before us is the PUD and the restriction in the PUD.
What period of time are you asking for? You said this is temporary. You realize that. What period of time are you asking for?
10 years.
10 years?
And at that time, a more permanent construction or something that would change in compliance with the PUD?
We definitely, between ourselves and our neighbors to the west, we think there's the potential to do a significant permanent building. A new
And the reason a permanent structure is not viable at this time is?
I'd like to buy a piece of his land, he'd like to buy my land.
The other interesting thing is, we sit in the PUD, he sits in DBD. So it's not like currently we could
It's too
mesh the two
conflicting. Yeah, it's too
together.
conflicting.
Yeah, so his side
Sides.
is a sliver of the PUD and an island surrounded by DBD. So there's a lot of complicated neighborly issues before really.
Well, assuming that one of you will sell at some point, how do they sort all that out in terms of what they're allowed to build? Or they build to the most restrictive?
Yeah, at some point, they'll either combine the properties and rezone one to DBD or another PUD, or something that's compatible in both.
That's something they'll have to work out in their negotiations, right?
Our intention would be to rezone the property back to DBD at some future date.
Questions?
I would be comfortable approving the application and give them a 10-year time limit.
We have a motion and a second. In favor? Your application's approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item number 12, case number 13841, request of Mason Realty Investors for a variance to the minimum three-story height requirement of the downtown business district located at 18 Northwest 9th.
Chris Lee, Mason Realty Investors, 2245 Northwest 20th. We're requesting a variance for the height. We own all the adjoining properties. There are no properties on the block that are more than 2 stories. We've developed the 9th Street with a mixed use, mostly restaurants and retail. This is something we've added. We think it really adds to the neighborhood. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I see the Downtown Design Review Committee has recommended approval, correct?
Yes.
And I see no unfavorable considerations from staff being reported. Are you aware of anybody that's in opposition to this application?
Is there anybody here in opposition?
Are you aware of anyone that opposes
No,
it?
there are none.
All right. I'd make a motion to approve.
Do we know how tall the proposed structure is?
I'm sorry?
How tall is the new structure, the structure you're proposing?
10 feet.
10 feet.
I'll second it. I heard a motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any other questions? Cast your votes. Motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 13, case number 13843, request of TSZ LP for a variance to the front yard setback, the required number of parking spaces, minimum aisle width standards, and to allow parking and maneuvering in the public right-of-way located at 1220 Northwest 3rd Street.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Mac McCune with Sawaski Construction. I'm here with Eric Mixon of Pumps of Oklahoma. We're here representing Ted and Sherry Zachary of the TLZP.
State your address, please, for the record.
1220 Northwest 3rd.
Thank you. Speak to your application.
Our first request is for the front setback. The original building we're looking at adding on to was built 17 inches over the build setback line. The people at Pumps of Oklahoma would like to build flush with that for aesthetically reasons. We've talked to all the neighbors and told them what's going on. We've even brought some letters that we had them sign with us. The other things are the parking spaces. We'd like to see if we can get a variance to limit the number of required parking spaces. As to the area that we're adding on is warehouse area only. We're not adding any employees to the area. Basically, like I said before, just trying to clean up the neighborhood. I know Ted and Sherry and Dick also own several pieces of property around this area. Northwest 3rd Street runs into a railroad track and dead ends. You can't get to it unless you go down 1st or 2nd on that block. So we do have the current existing parking does maneuver out into the right-of-way. And we'd like just a variance to keep that the way it is.
So we'll have, there's two items, the setback and then the number of parking spaces. There was one comment from our Department of Public Works and Traffic that says the applicant needs to construct ADA accessible sidewalks and curb ramps across the frontage of both Northwest 3rd Street and Douglas in conjunction with the application. Are you aware of that?
No, sir.
That's not something you would oppose, correct?
No, sir. We want to do everything possible.
That should have been my question. My apologies.
Yeah.
I don't really have an issue with the setback. I do have an issue with the parking. And again, the current use may not add employees at this time at least. But again, if that building sells or that business moves and another business locates there, I don't want to create a variance that allows the subsequent owner to not have to be in compliance. The other thing is, how are we supposed to view, the right-of-way issue? And, what things should we consider? Some streets are more heavily traveled, and I think, right-of-way, maneuvering in the right-of-way is perhaps more of an issue. Staff?
Well, I think that's exactly how you view it. If it is a street that doesn't carry much traffic, and actually the parking is not on the street, it is off on the property inside the curbs.
Yeah,
it does lap over onto the right-of-way.
Would a motion that was crafted to limit the parking variance to this use be effective in
Incorporating in the comments from the departments with the ADA sidewalk? Okay. You'd be comfortable with that?
Yes.
Both those things? Okay.
Yes.
Let's do them separately, unless anybody has any additional questions. So we'll deal with the setback first.
I would make a motion to approve
Second.
the variance request for the setback.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. And the second motion for the...
I would approve the variance request on parking conditioned to this use. Do you want a separate motion regarding the staff comments?
I think we can turn that into the same motion.
If we...
Yeah, we can include that in that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor? Your application's approved, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item number 14, case number 13833, request of Robin Castro for a variance to access to an approved street and the minimum lot width located at 14424 and 14550 North Indian Meridian.
Ms. Robin Castro was unable to make it in today. My name is Mary Lopez. I live at 4301 Northwest 49th Street, Oklahoma City, 73112.
Okay, and could you please speak to your application?
On January 2nd, we first appeared before this board requesting a variance for the properties in reference. In that meeting, there were a couple of concerns which were brought up by both Mr. Michael Vorel and this board. Mr. Vorel was under the impression that there were multiple buildings on this property, and this board wanted to know the use of the building. So to address Mr. Vorel's concern, a city inspector went out to our property, took photos of the building, and verified that there was only one building there. On a different day, we also invited Mr. Michael Vorel over so that he could verify for himself that there's only one building there. To address the board's concern regarding the use of the building, I want to make it clear that it will be a private residence. So we do appear before this board again, requesting the variance.
And I assume you'll have a septic system and a well system?
Yes, sir.
Or that you currently do? And you're aware that the variance approval will allow you to pull your building permits, but it doesn't guarantee access, and that's a private matter?
Yes, sir.
Well, they can't get permanent electricity without a building permit, and they can't get the building permit without the variance.
For the generator or something, I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, the way they're obtaining electricity right now is they're running off a generator.
Okay.
Kathy? Oh, that's his button. I'm sorry.
But I think what Mark's question is can they do that, indefinitely? And I guess they can live off the grid, and they can use generators or solar or whatever.
So the fact is, the residence isn't legal, so they shouldn't even be occupied to begin with. They need to get a building permit and permanent electricity.
And is that a part of this motion, or are we addressing that?
No, it is just, if you grant the variance, the only thing preventing them from going and getting a building permit and getting legal and getting permanent electric service is the access issue.
Okay.
So if you grant the variance of the access issue, they can
Then they
move
have to take-
forward. They move forward, get
They
a
take the
permit,
next step.
and become legal.
We allow them to become, a lot of property become inhabited. There was, I believe at the last meeting, the neighbor that was,
Yeah,
had
Mr. Michael
questions.
Vorel,
Right, is he?
he's
have
no
you-
longer in opposition. No.
Okay, he's no longer in opposition, and you guys have resolved your differences?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, since all we're doing is the 150-foot lot width and the access, I'm okay. I'll move approval.
I'll second it.
Any further questions by any of the board members? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 15, case number 13831, request of Jeff Struble for a variance to the hard surface paving, screening, landscape buffer, and minimum aisle width requirements located at 1614 and 1618 North Blackwelder Avenue.
Hello, I'm Jeff Struble, 1916 Northwest 18th Street. Here to answer any questions or any concerns.
Your application was approved by the Downtown Design Review Board and subject to a time limitation till 15, whereby the parking lot should be implemented to meet the standard or removed. So you're just asking for a 2-year variance.
Right, we're trying to purchase more land so we can do the whole project.
Okay.
Could you, the four standards that, help me understand. I get the 2-year limitation, but the staff points out correctly that there wasn't anything that addressed the statutory standards. What's the hardship and the other elements?
Well, the parking in the Plaza District is really limited, and we're trying to get some more property so that we can add some more parking to the area, and some, so the parking is the first hardship.
I guess the question is, even though you intend to acquire more land for parking, why not just go ahead and comply now?
Well, we have some other plans with some other development along with this, along with some other property that we own on the street, and we're wanting to have it all work together. And we're hoping in the next year to get a couple more, we're working with some other property owners, and we're hoping to have those purchased by the end of the year and to have a plan ready for you.
I don't have any problem with it if there's a limitation on the period of time.
I don't either, and I think, it sounds like you want to kind of create a master plan so that,
Correct.
All these elements are consistent, and I concur for 2 years, and, with your plan, I'm comfortable with your variance request.
I agree with that as well. I understand that developing is a process where you have to jump through lots of hoops economically and dealing with other parties, so I think I could support it. Any other questions? Entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve, subject to it being conditioned on a time limitation up through December 31st, 2015.
And a second.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you, sir. Your application is
very much.
approved.
Item number 16, case number 13821, request of Rob Holloway for a variance to the maximum number of permitted signs and the maximum height located at 14343 North MacArthur Boulevard.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Rob Holloway. I'm here representing Church of the Servant at 14343 North MacArthur. Also with me is Randy Schroner, our executive minister.
Okay. Please speak to your application.
All right, sir. Last time we were here, you had asked me to obtain a letter from the Galardia Development Company that they had been properly notified of the intention to build a new sign across on our property on the west side of MacArthur, and that letter is in your hands now.
And they do not have any objection or anything to...
No, sir.
Questions of the board?
I don't believe there's anybody in opposition here today on this application that I'm aware of.
I'd entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Item number 17, case number 13849, request of Rick and Kyle Gillum for a variance to allow a dog daycare center with outdoor runs located at 26 Northeast 9th Street, and they were approved by the DDRC today.
Thank you for seeing us. I am Bruce Bacchus, and I work at 6303 Waterford Boulevard, Suite 240, OKC. I resisted the temptation to bring my dog today.
Well, yesterday was the final day of the Westminster Kennel Show, so how appropriate that we're hearing this today.
Yeah. And we're asking for a variance on the zoning section 8300.11, which allows kennels, but not for outdoor use. And so a doggy daycare is sort of a hybrid. That works with dogs, doesn't it? A hybrid issue, because I don't think doggy daycare existed when the zoning ordinance was put together in regard to this. So this new business type is developed and has been successful in other parts of the city. We would like to have the opportunity to have a doggy daycare in the DBD, and that's why we're here today.
And the kennel area, the outdoor play area, will only be operated 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday.
That's correct. We're putting limitations on the use, which is consistent with a doggy daycare.
If there are no objections from the public or protesters, I would make a motion to approve the application.
Are you aware of anybody in protest?
I'm not aware of anybody.
Can we at least condition that on the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.?
I'd be more comfortable with that.
Yeah, sure.
I'll second it then.
All those in favor?
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Item number 18, case number 13852, request of Epworth Villa for a variance to the sign regulations located at 14901 North Pennsylvania Avenue.
I have a conflict. I serve on the board of directors of Epworth, so I'm going to let Mr. Voorhees run this docket item and step out.
Okay, now we're ready.
Great. My name is Brian Kuhn with Hewitt Zollers, representing Epworth Villa. Our request to you today, this is a senior living center. Obviously, you all have all been by there, a lot of construction going on, some new buildings, and we're requesting this variance to the sign ordinance. We've got a lot of elderly residents with a lot of elderly visitors, so we're just trying to, I'll wait till you leave so you don't have to hear any more of this. Anyway, just a variance to the sign ordinance to allow a few more signs on the boundaries. And again, none of these signs are taller than 8 foot anyway, which is what the normal height is, so we request your approval. I don't believe we have anybody against us here.
Questions, comments? Anybody here to oppose? Jeff?
I just have a question. Are all the new signs shown as proposed, are those all new?
Yes.
And how many existing signs are there? That's a bunch of signs.
How many existing now?
Yeah.
I don't know now. They've torn a lot out. They've done a complete campus renovation with all the new buildings. And so these are the ones you see on the application are where they're going to be, and those include existing, if there are any existing left. I think they're going to be all new signs.
This part of town has changed a lot since Epworth. When they built Epworth, it was out there, and it was essentially pasture and farmland around it. And now it's much more congested, and I'm sure that's part of the justification for good signage, good directional signage to help people find their way into the property effectively.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any other discussion? If not, cast your votes.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Item number 20, case number 13859, request of Greg and Laura Douglas for a variance to the 95-foot platted front building line located at 7809 Southwest 85th Circle.
Hi, I'm Cindy Cook. I'm the builder for Greg and Laura Douglas. I live at 8825 Legacy Crossing Drive. I'm here to answer any questions you have about the variance.
How many feet in the front?
We're asking...
I mean, that's narrow. I'm just curious.
We're asking for the front of the home to sit at 60 feet. The house...
Oh, no, I got that. I'm just...
Oh, I'm sorry.
How wide is it? Yeah. How many feet front 85th Circle? That's awful small.
How many feet are at the front?
Yeah.
I'd say probably 25.
Okay.
There's 2 lots in the subdivision that are approximately like that. The other one's at the first cul-de-sac that also doesn't have a home on it.
Okay,
Yeah, we ran a Google map just to... Is there already a house existing there and you're just adding on? There's nothing?
Home, or a vacant lot.
Good. And the reason you're requesting this is because of the odd shape of the lot?
Well, the odd shape of the lot, but the original developed plan that's with the city has a 10-foot drainage across that north part and both sides of the development because it's surrounded by agricultural land. So those drainage ditches are permanent easements that are set with the city plot plan with the developer. So it really makes the yard a lot less or smaller because that ditch is at least 10 feet wide.
And I take it the intent behind this is to have a larger backyard or have a usable backyard for
Correct.
Children, pets, et cetera?
It's approximately a half acre to 3/4 acre, and they have children and a mother who's going to live with them, so they're going to live here forever and hope to have a more usable backyard.
Is there anybody here in opposition today?
I don't believe so.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
It did. Gotcha.
Item number 21, case number 13851, request of Holiday Inn Express for a variance to allow parking and maneuvering in the public right-of-way located at 101 East Main Street.
Is anybody here representing the applicant? I hope you slept well, Mr. Box. With them not being here, would we need to continue it then?
I'll move continuance. What's next? March 6th?
Second.
If you don't have to pay another fee. Is that okay? Okay. We have a motion and a second for continuance. Please cast your votes. It has been continued.
Item number 22, case number 13824, request of Judah Christian Assembly for a variance to permit a building with exposed exterior metal located at 11701 Northwestern Avenue.
Is there anyone here on behalf of the applicant? He's not here. I would entertain a motion to continue.
Let's just move it. Move to continue March 6th, whatever's next. I'll pick a date.
Second.
March 6th.
All those in favor? Motion carries.
Item number 23, case number 13842, appeal of LH&D LLC of the decision of an administrative official regarding the nonconforming use regulations truck and trailer repair facility located at 2953 Northeast 23rd.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Also with me is Tony Ellis. Mr. Ellis's family can trace back their ownership of this property to 1970, and he'll be here to discuss the use and maintenance of the property during that time. Also here is Freddie Maldonado, who's the current owner of the property, and what is subject to this application. I'm going to start by having Mr. Ellis address the board and discuss his family's use and ownership, and then Mr. Dennis Box going to get up here and explain why the zoning case that you'll see in part of your exhibits came to fruition.
Very good.
My name's Tony Ellis. I work at 2301 West I-44 Service Road, Oklahoma City. My grandparents bought this property in 1970, and they used it as a warehouse and office headquarters for their pole line contracting business. They worked exclusively for OG&E, and he did that business out of that property from 1970 till 1984 when he sold out his or liquidated his business. It sat empty for about 3 years, and then our family, my dad started a construction company, and we used it for our yard and our warehouse and our mechanic space from 1988 until we sold the property in 2006. During the course of our ownership, or the ownership of my grandparents, we leased the property. On a couple of different occasions, some representatives from the city came by, and we were made aware of the zoning, but we were told at that time that due to the length of history and the use of it, that we would be grandfathered in, and nothing ever nothing ever took place while we owned the building. So after 2006, we sold it to Freddie Maldonado, and he's been using it ever since.
Dennis Box. The handout that we gave you, this handout, I want to show you a little bit about the history of the building. This shows you the building was built in 1946. Second picture is an example of the building. And the third is what we believe an article dealing with the annexation of the property in question. The annexation took place between Eastern and the river. And if you'll look at the next picture, you'll see the property in question, and it sits between those two areas, the Eastern and the river. The next exhibit, which is an exhibit showing an Oklahoma City directory, we were only able to go back to 1964, but as early as 1964, on the next page, you'll see that it was used for implement, and they took care of big tractors and other facilities. So what we've done is tried to patchwork together a history of, as far as we could go back, of the property. The old staff report that you see is a staff report from '74, and the interesting thing about it, just as the evidence you just heard, the area in question and the building we believe that you're dealing with here, on the second page, number 3, analysis of this general area reveals numerous commercially zoned properties and a number of non-conforming uses located along this segment of 23rd Street. And this is the segment that is in question here. Now, Ms. Powers was on the Planning Commission and got a chance to hear a zoning case that was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. And that staff report you have a copy of also. That's in the second handout that Mr. David Box gave you. And you'll notice that it talks about the non-conforming nature of this property. This property, for as long as we can find the directories and the history, has been used for similar or same kind of premises that our client has used it for. Somebody came along, and when we got involved in this case, the zoning case had already been turned down. We weren't involved in it. Our client did not appear at the City Council. He was under the impression that it was approved by the Planning Commission, therefore it would be approved by the Council. Council turned it down. They came to us, and we looked at it. Our position was it should never have been forced as a zoning case in the first place. We believe it's a non-conforming use, and David's going to talk to you about the non-conforming use ordinances, but our client is, he has a difficult time with English. He's in the chambers if you want to talk to him. But when we looked at it, we believe that the conditions set out in your ordinance on non-conforming uses have always been considered, looked at in the staff reports, and we believe we meet them. David?
Thank you. This is certainly a unique case in that like Dennis said, that we don't think he should have ever had to file a zoning case in the first place. When you look at an aerial, which you have in your packet, there are multiple industrial uses in this area, and it's shown as R1. And that's because the industrial uses came in sometime in the mid to late 40s. This building was built in 46, and at the time, it was not in Oklahoma City's boundaries. So fast forward to 1958, when it was incorporated into Oklahoma City, they came in with a blanket R1 zoning. That's typically what happens when cities annex property. So we believe firmly that the way that the building sits now means it's been industrial, heavy truck, or farm equipment use since 1946, 12 years before it was annexed into the city, and therefore they shouldn't have had to file a zoning case. It's similar to the other cases that you see around that are zoned R1 that haven't had to come in. As Mr. Ellis said, there were several times throughout the course of his family's ownership in which zoning inspectors would go out and they'd look at it because it's zoned R1 and they're doing something that is not in conformance with R1, but each and every time that happened, they were able to explain the history of the property, and that inspector came back and said, you're grandfathered in, i.e. it's a legal non-conforming use. It predates the city. Here, our client, as Dad said, I think didn't understand the process and has trouble understanding English. Therefore, all he knew was an inspector came out. He wasn't able to fully explain the series of events that had led up to his ownership, and they told him just go file a zoning application, which he did. And in the staff report for the application that came before the Planning Commission, you'll see it says this is a long-standing non-conforming use. So staff acknowledges that certainly this is a long-standing non-conforming use, and we would argue that means it is a legally non-conforming use as it predated the annexation into the city. Now, he moved forward. Planning Commission had all green lights up there, and he didn't understand the next step in the process was to go before the council. At the council, he did not appear, and it got summarily denied. So when we first met with him, we did all this research that Dad talked about, and we told him you shouldn't have had to do that in the first place. We think we have a way to get you where you need to be, and I think what you have before you now is that. It's an application that is right. It's an application that we think is founded on solid evidence based on old phone books and everything else that we could find.
So what your argument is that this building was built in 1946. In 1959, there is evidence of annexation by the city. So we've now become an illegal, non-conforming use.
Correct.
At that time. And that this has been operated since that time through the different phone book items and other things that you've shown us. And then that he should have basically not gone to the Planning Commission and come to this board to begin with because of the illegal non-conforming use?
Right. The basis of our argument is the zoning inspector, we're challenging the zoning inspector's determination that the use is illegal. It is a lawful non-conforming use, which is significant because it predates the annexation into the city. So what he should have done is explain, I bought it from the Ellis family, here's what they did, and here's what we know about the property. He didn't understand the process that he needed to undertake with that zoning inspector.
And the Ellis family developed the property?
No. They bought it with it already developed in 70.
Okay.
So it had been developed since 46.
Okay.
They just continued the use that was already there when they bought it in 1970. But we have, in our research, we found no evidence that there's been any other operation on this property other than
illegal non-conforming use.
Correct, other than what Mr. Maldonado is doing now.
Didn't Mr. Ellis say, though, that there was a gap of some years in which the property...
I didn't mean to infer that it was vacant. My granddad still drove to the office every day. He just didn't have an ongoing bit. He had a swimming pool construction business that was not as active as it was basically.
He was semi-retired.
Yeah.
It wasn't a stoppage that the ordinance contemplates. He just slowed down. But the use has been maintained. We found no evidence to the contrary. And all the zoning inspectors that came to the Ellis family back throughout the years, up to 2006, agreed. So we don't think we should have ever been in this position, but we are here, and we think all the evidence points to the fact that this is a lawful nonconforming use that should be allowed to continue. Also, what you have in that packet is several pictures of all the other lawful nonconforming uses that are up and down 23rd Street.
And when I looked at Northeast 23rd, up and down the street from this piece of property, it seemed that there were multiple auto salvages, maybe 4 or 5.
That's correct.
I mean, there's not large residential developments that adjoin any of this property, correct?
That's correct.
And you're asking us to reverse the city's findings and grant a variance for a nonconforming use? Is that what you want us to do?
No, we are appealing I'm not sure how it needs to happen, but we're appealing the decision that that zoning inspector made that it was not a lawful nonconforming.
Sure, and we can either uphold that, we can reverse that, or we can modify it. So
Correct.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we're asking for a reversal, or they're asking
Yes.
for a reversal, and in that reversal, a variance be granted for a nonconforming use.
Well, it's not a variance, you're just making a determination that the interpretation by the zoning inspector is incorrect, and that it should be a legal nonconforming use.
Okay.
So you're making that
Will
determination.
anybody speak on behalf of the city today?
Is there anybody here from the city of Oklahoma City?
And I
We
think
have
it
no
is-
evidence to the contrary.
I'm sorry?
We have no evidence to the contrary.
And I think it is important to note that there are safeguards for the city. As a legally nonconforming use, they can't expand their use. So this doesn't give them the ability to just go and do this.
They can basically do what they do now and operate, and that's
Correct.
it. That's the parameter.
Yes, they cannot expand the use. It allows for modernization of the building or something, but they can't expand their operation.
So if the property sells and somebody tries to put something else in there, what happens?
If
right back
it's
here.
misuse, it could continue.
So if they sell the business continues doing the same use that it is now.
On the same scale.
All on the same scale. Nobody has to come back before us or anything else. If they change that use,
They would need to rezone.
they would need to rezone.
Or expand it, they'd need to rezone.
But my concern was the same as Janice, I think. Was there ever a gap? Was the place closed up, not used, vacant for whatever is the time limit that destroys legal nonconforming?
I don't believe so. Like Mr. Ellis alluded to, his grandfather didn't go in as much, but it was never just, boarded up and we're out of here.
And this is a very unique stretch of street in Oklahoma City where you have these salvage yards, these wrecking companies, these tire facilities, and it's been like that ever since I can remember. I mean, question?
Help me word it right. I'll make the motion
to reverse.
Yeah, to reverse the decision. I find that it was legal nonconforming since whatever date it got annexed.
Is that how we should say it? Okay. I think that's, I asked the counselor, she said it was appropriate. So all those in favor? Appeal is reversed.
Thank you very much.
Item number 24, case number 13805, appeal of First National Bank and Trust Company of the decision of an administrative official regarding the maximum sign height of PUD 1135 or a variance to the maximum 12-foot sign height located at 8504 Southwest 59th Street.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I guess we get the honor of being last.
You've got everybody's attention.
We are asking for two different forms of relief. Either one will satisfy what we're trying to accomplish. The first is an appeal of the administrative official's decision, and the second is a variance. I'll cover them kind of jointly and answer any questions you have. As quick background, First National Bank has representatives here, as well as the sign company who actually built the sign originally. They purchased this property in October 2008. Shortly after that, in the early part of 2009, began construction of the building. In order to construct the building, they graded down the property towards the streets for drainage as required, and as a part of that process, they left a spot for the sign to be built. And in one of the pictures that we submitted in our discussions with staff that shows you that an angle from the side of the building and from the lobby entryway shot out towards the sign. The point was to illustrate that the sign actually sits, the base of the sign actually sits level with the grade of the structure of the building, which was the intent of the ordinance, was so that the sign would be at the same grade as the building. The concept being we don't want somebody going out there to a piece of property and building up a 10 or 20 foot mound and then putting a sign on top of it so they can get higher elevation on their sign. That is not what happened here. The sign was built at the same grade as the building. We recognize that what occurred was that when you drive by and look at the property, it does look like somebody went out there and built a little mound and put a sign on top of it because there was no landscaping or anything done concurrently with the construction work at the time, even though there was some discussion and consideration of it. But I do think it's important to note that the sign was permitted. There was an application filed for the sign. Permit was issued by the city of Oklahoma City. The sign's been operational for years, and a new code enforcement officer came out recently, which is what led to the filing of this case, and it looked to him as if it was in violation because it looked like it was a sign built on a mound. But in reality, it was the sign built at the same elevation as the building. At the time the building was being constructed, the sign was constructed at the same time, and the mound was left there as a natural part of the property at the time that the building and the sign were both constructed concurrently, which is why it was all fully and properly permitted. Based on all of that, it's our position that the administrative official's decision was inappropriate and not consistent with the intent of the ordinance, which the intent of the ordinance was to have the sign at the same natural grade as the building, and that is in fact the case. But in an effort to be good community citizens, if you will, and to assist in this process, the bank has proposed and is willing to do this, and happy to have it as a part of your stipulation of either one of your recommendations, whether the appeal or the variance, to go ahead and put landscaping around the sign and the mound area, if you will, to help it blend in and soften the look so there's not any confusion in the future. With regard to the variance component, we would certainly argue that a variance is warranted because of the slope on the property in light of the drainage issues and requirements that the sign, I think it's approximately 2 or 3 feet, that it does sit, if you were to say that the natural elevation was actually at ground level, the mound, if you will, is approximately 2 or 3 feet, and that the variance is warranted because of the peculiar circumstances regarding this piece of property resulting from the grading and the drainage that had to occur as a part of the construction of the building. Do you have any questions for me?
That's what I was asking.
Or.
Explain
Explain that to me. I'm not sure I follow.
You reverse, you don't
If you grant the variance, you don't have to reverse.
But if you grant the variance, we could also add the landscaping requirement, correct?
And you can put in the minutes that if you reverse the administrative official's decision, we are agreeing and committed to doing the landscaping, like I said, in either circumstance.
You can add the landscaping with either.
I think
Just
you
put it in
can
the board
modify.
order.
I am a little torn by this one, I have to say. Generally, I think Planning Commission, when we're talking about sign heights, we talk about street grade. They're currently building a bank at 50th and Western that the bank is up on a mound, so I'm hoping they're not going to be measuring the height of their sign from that. I think it's really from street grade that we measure sign height. And so probably the original sign should have been lower than it is now. But at the same time, it's up, it was permitted, it was approved, it's been operating for 4 years. On the other hand, I don't want to give anybody down in the code enforcement world the idea that they should stop going out and, citing people because they're building signs on mounds. Otherwise, we'll have them all over the city. I just think the timing of this one was inappropriate, so.
I think that's a fair statement, because you do have parts of the city, and there are a lot of, especially out parcels, that sit on either in a bowl or up on a mound, and it is measured from the street level. And I would not wish anybody to encourage code enforcement, but this has happened, and they're making a very significant investment in landscaping and doing the right thing and being a good neighbor and coming forward. And to me, that helps me get there a little easier.
Yeah, we encourage code enforcement. This wasn't an intentional act to avoid the ordinance, and so however we can
So
best...
as between the two is what I get my point, I guess. I think I would rather grant them a variance than reverse the code enforcement officer.
Code enforcement.
Yeah, if we grant the variance, can we ignore the appeal so we don't have to say yes or no? Okay, I'll move approval of a variance with the landscaping.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathy, is there any other business before us?
That is it, except a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Amen. We're adjourned.